So to kick us off, tell me a bit about yourself, your background, your current role, and just ultimately how you ended up where you're at right now.
So my background from young adulthood, it's basically all I've ever known was working in retail automotive. Started out selling cars. Most people don't wake up one day and go, I want to do that for a living. It ends up being a job that somebody recommended you, or you're like, I need something and I don't know what to do with myself. And this is where I am. Which is the great thing about the automotive industry, though, is there's really no dependency on what type of experience you have, or you'd like to think that you're going to hire educated people, but it's not a requirement. You don't have to have a formal education or a bachelor's degree. And oftentimes, you can make as much money as people who do have various degrees. It's a really great industry to be in, but accidentally just stumbled upon, not intending to, ended up selling cars. Did that for a few years for the same dealer group, went to right service just because the hours were better. And I was becoming of the age where I got married and have children. And, that comes with a little consistency, which is great. Then was promoted in the same group to a service manager. And then as my career moved on, I moved into larger roles. It just kept escalating, larger dealerships, larger roles, dealer groups, and finally ended up as a fixed ops director at a group. And from there, I moved into decided that I was ready to support dealers versus working in one myself, took all my experience so I could be a bigger impact in my mind. So I went and worked for a large company called Cox Automotive, who is basically one of, if not the biggest automotive vendors in the space. They have lots of products that they offer, scheduling tools, inspection tools, equity tools, lots of stuff. And was a senior performance manager for 4 years. Also worked in risk and retention there. And then finally, before my tenure was done, I worked with strictly enterprise accounts, so large dealer groups that were spanning North America. And that was an experience all in and of itself. But my role there probably really catapulted me or prepared me for what I'm doing now and where I see myself here at Quantum. And there was a lot of the intent, of course, is we have a product they're paying for monthly and we want them to continue using it like any of those kind of software as a service sort of companies. But really, the software was just a vehicle to do bigger things in my mind. It was more operational proficiency and excellence. A lot of the managers that I was connecting with and working with to use these tools really didn't have the skill set or the aptitude to do the job that they currently had. That included leading their teams or using the software or knowing what to do financially, how to price things, how to set stuff up. So there's a lot of that happened. I met with people pretty much monthly and really just became like my whole goal was to provide such a value that they just could not live without it. We just connected. They always met with me. It was never a, oh, I'll catch you next time. It's a, hey, do you have time to connect with me even earlier than we normally meet? Found a lot of value in that. And then finally took some time to evaluate where I wanted to be at this stage of my career. And the quantum opportunity presented itself from a former coworker of mine from Cox Automotive. And it just the culture here that they shared and seemed to emulate was just like unbelievable and unheard of. The way that everyone just interacts with each other and the way that they really just not only conduct business, but their values in general. So that was probably the biggest thing that was an attractor for me. That's what I was looking for versus it just being, look, we need you to keep paying. It was, we're doing a bigger thing here. We're hoping to really make a mark on the automotive industry. And regardless of where I think my skill set might be, I think I'm a phenomenal salesperson. I think I'm really high aptitude for technical stuff and I'm good with people, but really in your heart of hearts, you want to do something that feels more impactful. And so I liked that. I liked that. And ultimately, my role now, I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of hats, but I started in community success and I'm still working there. But I work with our enterprise client, one of the OEMs we work with. And I also work with on our direct to dealer side. So I support dealers and do coaching and things like that. So I do a lot of stuff. I've got really, I wear a lot of hats.
Very cool.
That's a
Yeah, it's
lot of
always
information.
no, that's awesome. I always love to hear how people get to where they're at, and the path is always awesome. And then, so yeah, with that, transitioning from sales to service to where you're at now, were there really any like pivotal experiences that kind of shaped your approach to leadership and operations? Can you think of a specific time or example, or I guess anything that you could
Yeah,
share would be
yeah.
great?
Yeah, I think that's probably a really good question to ask too, because I have a lot of philosophies that maybe some people it really resonates with when they hear the way that I share, but maybe they haven't thought that way. But there's also people who think completely differently because that's just the way that it's always been, and they feel like that's the effective way. And some of that came from so my first experience, you always have these like core memories when you work places sometimes, just in life in general. And it isn't often in the automotive industry that when you're a new hire that you're onboarded where you actually one have all the resources you need to do your job. For instance, a login to get into whatever system or training or any sort of process that you're supposed to follow. It's just I make this joke. The automotive industry does their onboarding like this. It's either trial by fire. So just get out there and you're going to learn by doing. Okay, who knows if I'm doing right, really? Or you're going to get trained by the tallest of the pygmies. So whoever is the best person in my mind, I'm going to have you just follow them around and you just see what they're doing, which neither are really ideal. I think maybe some of that there's a place for at some point you just have to cut the cord and get out there and do, but you've got to prepare them first. Show them what good looks like and practice with them before they're live. But then the other side of it is good to see someone who is performing at the level that you want them to also emulate. So there's a place for that too, but it usually doesn't happen right away when somebody's like, "Here you go, welcome to the company. Just start doing your job even though you don't know how to do your job." So my entry into sales, I had a sales manager who was like half motivational speaker, half like he just was like the most inspirational person you could probably ever imagine, ex-military and just like really positive, very unlike the traditional stereotype for a sales manager in the car business, honestly. I think that's changing a little bit, but I was very fortunate. And it was like a 2 week, just really slow walking, selling the dream to me and setting the right tone for what is it that we're doing here? Sure, we want to make money, we want to sell cars. Here's really what type of experience. And even back then, early 2000s, that was different than even what people are doing now, but certainly back then. And then eventually, like I had SOPs. I knew do this first, then do this. We role played. We did shadow. And then finally it was time to go. You just got to step off the curb and go catch your first up and go to sell a car. So that was really something that always stuck with me. And as I went to other companies throughout my career, it wasn't always like that. Eventually, I got to the point I'd like to think that I've got a fairly high aptitude. I don't wanna say I'm always the smartest person, but I try my best to know what I'm talking about. I feel like that's always been made me an effective even just salesperson or effective communicator. I don't wanna speak on something until I can anticipate all the things that I should probably know and cover. But oftentimes when you're not in a position of leadership or management, especially in some automotive companies where, you don't know how really they're run, in your mind that you can probably do a better job. And some people I heard this phrase, I think I had a manager who used to say this, you manage as you've been managed. And that's usually true because again, most people are not trained to do the job. The same thing with managerial sort of onboarding. Maybe somebody gets promoted. It usually isn't a matter of, we see this potential in you and we're going to give you this opportunity and we're going to prepare you for it. We're going to give you all the tools that you need because you've never led before. So we're going to show you how to be a good leader and how, because it's different. Just because you're a good worker bee doesn't mean that you're going to be good at a whole different type of job, that it's not just doing the function that we need you to do. Now you're keeping the train moving, keeping the wheels on track. So you always go, "I think I can do that better." You in your mind, you're like, I don't know that I'll ever find anybody that would do it the way that I think it needs to be done." And sometimes that can be a very arrogant way to think when you're at that stage of your career. And then you're in for a rude awakening once you do get that opportunity because you were not prepared for it, which is no different than anyone else in leadership in the car business. People just go, "I had this person quit or I fired them. And again, you're the tallest of the pygmies, so you're welcome. You're, promoted by proxy." These people are put into positions and just have no idea what they're doing. Just because they were a good service advisor or salesperson or whatever their role was, they're not equipped to lead. And it becomes the car business is really tough. You're graded on everything that you do because every month you have a performance metric that the dealer principal or the general manager is expecting of you. And once that month is over, whether you performed or not, the next month is here and they say 0 to 0, as soon as the month starts. So none of what you did last month mattered. And now we're starting over. And so that can be really daunting for a manager, especially one that is not experienced, who has not had any training, maybe doesn't even know how to understand what's healthy or not in a financial statement or with people. Like you've got people, it seems like a toxic person or somebody's really just causing a problem. And, you know, you learn often, most of us do from making a mistake, hopefully. And certainly what happens is if you're an inexperienced manager, you make a lot of mistakes because you're not taught any kind of way. So you're just doing managing as you've been managed. So you either figure it out or somebody lets you go or you move on and you start again, but you never actually solve the problem, right? So for me, feeling a little bit of that myself in my early years, I had some really good success, especially my first management job. I think it was just the right pace. It was a brand new, smaller store, but was able to just really build it from the ground up the way that I thought it should have been, and was able to just really do amazing things. And that helped me develop, I think, some good habits and some good processes. But that doesn't mean I knew everything. Right. So, but always on a path to learn like every day. It doesn't matter how much I think I know about something. I think everyone has something to share with me that I'm going to take and consider. And so I'm constantly evolving. The Japanese call it kaizen, every day, constant improvement. And some of the Japanese automakers use kaizen in their processes when they're building cars and whatnot. So in that mantra, I've learned a lot throughout the way. And when I finally got into a position where I could I'm working with these managers and I'm seeing sometimes myself early on, or maybe just knowing how things are, and maybe the person that's leading them is not giving them the support that they need. It really became just this eye-opening experience. It wasn't just my experience. Now I'm seeing everyone else have a similar sort of experience and everyone just floundering. So I really attribute everything that with any industry really, but certainly the automotive industry, if you're having problems with maybe you're having a customer retention problem, your customers aren't coming back. You're having a profitability issue. Maybe you're not selling enough, or maybe your expenses are too high, whatever. Maybe you're having an employee retention problem. Almost always, in practically every instance, it can be linked back to the leadership. And it could be from a higher level. Often decisions are made, and the higher leaders should be supporting the lower level managers. But even if they've got good upper leadership, the lower leadership doesn't know what they're doing and they have no one to support them. So I think my strategies are usually a little bit of a combination of personal and professional coaching. Doesn't mean I'm a therapist, but certainly there are dynamics that you experience, and you're a human, so you feel emotions, having to deal with things. It can be frustrating when someone sets an expectation on you and you don't know how you're going to achieve it because it seems impossible, or you've got this employee dynamic that's really just tough to deal with, but it's hard to find good people, so you can't just let them go, and you just have so much to deal with. And on top of that, you have to be really good with creating this customer experience that is just like exceptional that people demand nowadays. Everything is centered around the customer. And how do they do all that? So I felt that myself. And I think that's in part why it's become my main sort of my focus.
What are like some of the most common challenges related to change management that you see dealers typically experience? And then how would you navigate those?
So that's a perfect question because I had once upon a time I actually did a presentation on this, and it was working with my peers, not dealer facing. And it was basically you're going to have these different types of managers that you connect with, or whoever your contacts are, whoever is at the dealership making the decisions. And really, there needs to be a different strategy for all of them because they all have a different need. So, when in terms of change management, you've got the ones that are brand new or inexperienced, and they're very eager, right? On one hand, you think that everyone is just, you've got their attention. They seem like engaged. They seem, oh, yeah, they're getting it and they really want to take it and run with it. Doesn't matter. Maybe you're, supporting service advisors or sales like we're doing with Quantum 5. I mean, it could be at any level. But because it sounds good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're equipped to do anything with that information yet because of their experience and skill level. They really need more support. So, oftentimes with change management, first you have to create an awareness for change, right? But in this subset of people, they see that things aren't the way that they ought to be, and that maybe they have some not lack, but just again, inexperience and need some skills or some direction. They require much more hand holding. You might think, people often think that they're communicating very clearly and going, we covered this, we had a meeting or we had a phone call and we discussed it. But then you went away, and for however long it takes for you to come back and check in on them is did they remember or were they able to implement any of that? So, my strategy usually with people, most people, but certainly those people, we got to start with one thing that you can get hopefully a quick win with so that you actually it encourages them, it helps them to see that it's not so bad or whatever you're proposing or trying to work with them on is attainable, and then it starts this snowball, right? And then it can just progress from there. Maybe later we can get to adding a couple things to their plate. But I also think for me, whenever I'm working with anyone, again, really at any level, manager or not, I do like to do some of the hard work for them first. So if I'm just like, you need to do this, and it's just this concept or this, they know they need to focus on that. They really just don't know how. And then when we're finished connecting, it's a matter of, do I even have time to sit and think about it and create or iterate or build a structure or process of how I'm going to achieve it? Oftentimes, no. So if I'm ever trying to support anyone in any way, I usually like to get them as far along as I can, even if maybe I got it all wrong, but at least gives them a starting point and they can edit as they need, or we can talk it through about how, it can be modified for whatever their needs are. And with dealers, just think it's just the best strategy because literally as soon as you're done, they have 10 things waiting for them that you hope that they're gonna circle back on what you guys discussed, but oftentimes they don't. So you've gotta help them help themselves. There's also, another manager type, and I'll usually, put this in a category of more seasoned or experienced managers. There's 2 groups of those, but one is more receptive. So usually these people have been very proficient and successful in their career, but they're at the stage where things are escalating and moving so quickly in terms of could be again the customer's needs and what their expectations are, could be technology, could be just marketing, any number of things that are just outside of their scope now. Wasn't before the old way, but they know they need to change. They just really don't know where to go or how to do it. So instead of someone just being all over the place and brand new and really not being able to handle much, these people they have consistency and they're very solid. It's just a matter of I don't know how to evolve. in the current climate. Again, those people usually benefit from a strategy, but you don't have to slow walk them quite as much as I would the first one because again, they can barely handle much right now. These folks, they already have a pretty solid operation. They just don't know how to take it to the 2025 at this point, right? Usually you can give them more advice, less granular detail because they'll have their own context. They'll have their own systems that they're already used to do it. They just don't know what's best. So just advice really, more like peer to peer. You've got this other group that is oftentimes it's the same generational sort of grouping where I've been in the car business a long time and I know what's going on, but they're absolutely resistant to any way other than their way. And those honestly are the toughest because it's very difficult to get them to see the need for evolving their tactics. Oftentimes those people are the ones that are really tough to work for and that see a lot of employee turnover. And thus, because of that, they see profitability and customer retention issues. Usually their strategy is to price things to accommodate for their lack. So now you're pushing customers further away. You're making it harder for your team to sell. And it's just a really tough environment for me. The only way to really, I don't want to say the only way, but a strategy I use for these people is often it has to be based on facts. Like I usually employ a lot of data or information, just, give them the concept of where we need to go. But it really has to be your strategy for these people because they already think they know. So unless you have the facts and the data, it's going to be really tough for them to see. And also persistence. I think that when working with dealers or anyone who is resistant to change, just constantly being around. And it's almost like you would do with marketing, where it's you go to a baseball game and State Farm in the outfield, a banner. And that doesn't mean that banner is making me go buy insurance from State Farm, but it's constantly in the front of mind, basically. I've had success working with dealers that just would ghost me with to every effort for months and months, up to a year even, and they're still mine to work with. And then eventually, little time after little time where they had to connect with me for assistance, they realized what I could offer and what I could do, and later would go, "I don't know what took me so long to really work with you." It's usually arrogance a little bit. It's we think we know better. Who's gonna tell me? I'm the one here. I've been doing this for so long. But again, just chipping away at that exterior little by little gets you there. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the majority of type of people that you end up working with. I would say too, aside from leadership, just change management in general, trying to get people even at the store to adopt a new way of doing things or a new way of thinking. It really just boils down to meeting them where they are. I'll give you an example. When I was with Cox Automotive, we did have, again, the software was the vehicle in which we connected. And then we were able to talk about much more important, deeper things like the way in which we communicate with customers and things like that. And there was always, as a company, a big rejection for people who had been doing this a long time. And they're like, we use paper forms, or we like to manually walk up to the parts department and talk to them, or whatever their old school process was. And we're trying to teach them a new way. And it's often because we're going so fast. So again, I don't think I'm the smartest person, but I think I'm smart sometimes anyway. And usually people like me, especially, they feel like it's necessary to not flaunt it, but just, I need to show you that I'm smart enough for you to listen to and I've got something to say, which that can also be to your detriment because it's with these people, they've been doing it a long time and you're trying to come in here real fast and just throw a bunch of stuff at me and say, this is the new way we're doing things. And they're like, yeah, okay. And, but it's often because they feel they're overwhelmed and it's also really tough because their pace is different. So if I'm teaching somebody something, I get just yesterday went through an internal like training on how to use a tool, and there's a super brilliant fella that works with us, and he was conducting it. Um, and I have a, I'm usually pretty quick. I can pay attention and really get a lot out of stuff. but it was really fast for me because I'd never seen it before. I haven't worked in this tool. So at the end of the day, I think I'm losing my headphones here. At the end of the day, I felt like I was getting lost in the information and I'm not gonna be able to keep up. So as soon as this is over, I don't know that I'm gonna be able to do anything with everything you showed me because it just went too fast for me. And in that moment, I felt like I was in that bucket where I need someone to recognize my pace, the place I am in the whatever aptitude or capability in what you're trying to teach me. And there has to be a different strategy for help me know. And then we're going to talk about the why. And then we're going to talk about how I apply it. And we're going to practice some scenarios or show me an example of what that looks like. And then I'm going to drive and then I'm going to do it. That's when I step off the curb and go catch my up kind of thing, as they say. So it's also a matter of the method in which you are trying to convey new information. You might have a big group of people that you're trying to do a presentation for or teach them something, and you have everybody's at a different place. So it's really important to assess that. And if you can accommodate for all learning levels and whether people are open to it or not, you got to set the stage to make sure that they are open. Everything is like sales for me at the end of the day, because I'm ultimately trying to get you to think about things a little differently. And I'm selling you on something, even though I'm hoping it's not like a manipulative way. I'm just trying to get you to open your eyes. But if you don't take that time to do that and speak to what they value, what is important to them? How is it going to solve a problem for them? Not just somebody has some data and said, this is what people are doing now. This is what customers want now. It also needs to be a matter of this is my life and my day to day. So, how is what you're proposing? How is that going to impact me? How is that going to help me? Because then I might be willing. If the pain of staying the same was greater than the pain of change, then I'd like to do that, please. Yes, thank you.
What are some ways you've seen service managers delight customers in the service bay? Any examples from a specific dealership or any thoughts there?
I think that this one can be a little trickier because there are a lot of ways that people can it really depends on your market, I think. But there's certainly some things that I think are useful and important. I think for one thing that I think most dealers need to consider and evolve to is some level of vehicle pickup and delivery to service their car. It doesn't mean that it has to be a huge expense because I think that's the big fear. During COVID, a lot of people realized that's the only way we're going to get this done. And everyone basically was offering that because people were scared to come into the dealership and wait. So if it wasn't that, it wasn't anything. But once business went back to usual, we put that away and said, it's too expensive to have to have a porter or driver and car their car and have another car to follow them and just so many things that have to be considered. But during COVID and during that time, everyone did it for free. Really. There was no cost to the customer for that. And I think that consumers have proven with all these subscription services and DoorDash and everything else that people are willing to pay a fee for convenience. If there's anything that really speaks to what people want right now, it is the evolution of how convenience has become more important. In many cases, their time is valuable to them now. So, what can you do to make my experience more convenient and easier? And sometimes it's a matter of I will pay you whatever you want if you'll just come pick up my car and bring it back to me. But, again, I think everyone's trying to do that for free. So that's something that just doesn't math very well. I think some other things that have been really revolutionary are, the use of technology in general is often looked at as like a necessary evil in some cases. Some people really embrace it. But for some of it could be more rural or stores have been around a long time and haven't made it a priority. Texting and ultimately being able to track the progress of my car, just like I'll use the food delivery as the example again, or like a pizza delivery place. You can see at what stage it's at. I think that is really something that is greatly necessary. But in terms of just delighting people, so My since leaving retail automotive, I've now become a civilian and from my perspective, I always thought I tried to really look at things objectively like the customer would. I thought I was doing a really good job of that, but I didn't realize truly how much we don't think about it like that until we actually are the customer and we don't know anybody at the dealership when we show up. Because I've always, in my market, I know everybody. I can pull up anywhere and be like, hey, I want so and so to work on my car. Hey, how's it going? I just, you don't have to have that formality of experience like you would expect other places because you have a relationship already. And I think the thing that really changes things is when we can have time to develop that relationship. I'll give you another example. Since being a civilian, I actually have not had the type of experience that I train on since I left. There have been some that have gotten close, but there have been opportunities missed. I could have shown up. I pull up and the car basically, I get out of the car. Somebody walks up, doesn't greet themselves, just start with a tablet, just starts walking around my car. I have no idea who they are. I'm assuming they're in service because I'm pulled up the service, but I have no clue. They don't introduce themselves. They don't tell me, like, I have an appointment. What do you have on my appointment? What am I here for? You should be able to see that and regurgitate that back to me. Instead, they just hand me once it gets to the screen where I'm signing, I don't know what I'm even signing for at this point. I'd like to think that I have a lot of things that can delight that are just over and above, but honestly, the bare minimum way that dealers are not delighting is just by doing things that people expect done. I show up, you greet me. I don't just stand there and just everybody's running around looking super busy. And I know you see me. I'm literally standing outside of my car right here. And it's at the end of the day, it's if I look super busy, then maybe I won't have to stop what I'm doing and help you. It's just little things like that. Just what type of experience are you providing? Is there any awareness to like what's happening? Tell me what's happening next. You just took my car in, when can I expect to hear from you? Or where should I go? I didn't even know. They didn't ask me if I was waiting or not. Didn't tell me where the waiting room was. I'm just like, okay, we're done. Yeah, we're all set. Okay, great. Will you text me or call? This is like the norm. I don't want to say it's, everybody's like this because there are some dealers that do a really good job, but more often than not, it's a need. It's a need. Yeah, I would definitely say that those kind of things are really it.
I've experienced that so many times too, even outside of auto. It's like you're, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm new here. I don't know where to go, what to do," and
Right.
people just act like
Yeah, it's crazy. I went to one, so when I was a manager still, I was at a store and it needed some rehabilitation. That's why they hired me. And so the advisors, it can be really easy it doesn't matter if you're sales, service, or what department you're in, you get in this like routine. Like these are the steps of doing your job. This is what I'm supposed to do. So if a customer doesn't easily just fall into that or they ask questions, everything becomes like I'm treating you very mechanically instead of warm and open and understanding where you're at, setting the right expectations. So one of the things I wanted to do was this exercise. I like to do this with it. A lot of departments I've worked in where let's look and see what other people are doing so that you can see it from the outside looking in. So we would go and mystery shop other dealers in our area, not necessarily our competitors, because oftentimes they knew of us and they might know us, but even a different make and that kind of thing. So we would go across town and, bring a car in. And I remember one time we pulled up, there was a line of cars. No people in these cars. They're just cars that haven't been parked, I think, just clogging up their service drive. And so we stood outside of the car where you would expect us to be. You're like in line waiting. You don't know if there's people in these cars or not as a consumer. So I'm just treating it like any other customer would do. And nobody's coming up. 10, 15 minutes are walking back and forth across from the shop to their desks, and nobody even gives us a glance. So I'm like, let's move forward. So we leave the car, we walk up a little closer. Now we're directly in the drive. You can see everyone's desk. There's a shop on the other side. And same thing. people looking busy, running back and forth. No customers still, by the way, just people working and still nothing. So they had glassed in desks. So I said, let's now step inside of this little area. Like we're directly in front of these people. Somebody will speak to us, hopefully. And after about 10, 15 minutes of that, literally directly in front of one desk in particular, the guy lifts his head up and he says, "You're dropping off or picking up?" And that's pretty much the extent of most stereotypical service experiences, to be honest. No, "Hey, welcome. We're so glad to see you. You must be Miss Stevens." No, it's just, "Do you have an appointment? What are you here for?" No idea. And that's just getting over that's like the challenge. We just don't even do that very well. So that's really the big focus, I would say.
I think, yeah, we've all had experiences where we can relate to that in some way. And you had mentioned too that leadership development and support is, you said, the number one neglected area in the industry. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's a matter of I really honestly think it's just because of the culture of automotive prior. So from earlier than the 90s, but historically, it's always been we're gonna we're gonna make a good living. We're gonna sell you, but we're gonna be excellent salespeople. And but we're not necessarily the experience wasn't the concern. It was a matter of we're negotiating and we're doing all these things. You're on my time, kind of thing, in a way. And then really the internet probably onset that quite a bit because now there's more exposure. More people are talking besides just peer to peer. Oh, I can share with my little circle what my experience was like, but it wasn't posted on a review anywhere. It wasn't public knowledge. And I could easily search your competitors, and maybe your competitor has pricing online, and maybe they have different amenities and things like that. So the competition obviously has increased in the exposure quite a bit. And so, not just our industry, but just our culture and our society in general, most companies have evolved to understand that and embrace that. But automotive still, like, I think they just had it too good for so long. And, we're just making a killing. And now we're evolving to a point where, people can see what stuff costs now. There's exposure. If you're not transparent and above board, they're going to know because they can easily search it anywhere. There became this huge divide of people not knowing what to do with that, generational dealers who've always done things this way. And I need customers trying to buy online or ask questions, and we don't want to give them any information. We want them instead to just get them to come in, we tell the staff. But these customers are like, why can't you just tell me what the price is? Or just tell me if you have this car or whatever the instance is, whether it's service or sales. It's just we make it so difficult. And it's because we're trying to control that, where now I think everyone's really starting to feel it more and more. Sales, especially service. We have a little bit of a captive audience right now, which is to our detriment because the financially people are doing better, like they're making more money. However, expenses and the cost of living has went up so much, and people's credit has been affected, and there's just so many factors that now if you're trying to sell somebody a car, they may not have the money or they may not have the credit more than ever before, might not have a cosigner. So what are they doing? They're keeping the car longer than they ever have. I don't know what the latest statistic was. I think a couple years ago it was like 14.1 years. So surely it's probably more now because the industry keeps going in that direction. And so you have people who have to keep their cars. They don't really have a choice. They can't buy a new one. They don't have any means or way to do that. So service departments are just slammed full of customers in most cases. They're just running around like crazy. And because you want the revenue, you're like, maybe your schedule is just not tweaked to your shop capability very well, but just a productivity sort of situation that you have an issue with. And they don't know really where to go with that. Because again, this isn't something you're classically trained on. Some people might have an aptitude to like figure things out at some point, but most of the time it's like they do what they think they should, but they don't know because they don't know how to use the tools they have and they don't know how to figure out what their shop capacity should be and what's carrying over. So they just turn up or turn down their schedule as it's happening in the moment. and it's just constant, like, putting out fires all the time. So it's really difficult to get your arms around that without maybe some coaching and support and guidance, and it's just compounded to this moment where I don't know that it's gonna get better until people are willing to really acknowledge that we've gotta step back. Maybe we do have to turn it down a little bit so I can solve the problem, put some processes and some training in place, and be able to actually handle efficiently the flow that I'm trying to take in. The other thing is I think oftentimes we waste opportunities because of that. So customers are coming in and maybe you did like the experience I shared with you. Right out the gate, I've got a bad impression. So by the time we even get to the point where you're going to tell me what my car needs and other stuff that it needs that you noticed, I'm closed off to that because I'm having a terrible experience. I just want my car back. Just do what I asked you to do and let me get out of here. We don't really think about, we just think we need to train them how to sell better and overcome objections. The problem is not that. The problem is we need to prevent more objections than we need to overcome in most cases. We should already know our customer at that point to where we can, be better prepared to serve them.